When my stepmom called me in pool. Some memories never fade, no matter how many years pass. They stay sharp and bright, like broken glass buried under skin. The kind of memory that reminds someone how easily happiness can be destroyed by a single moment that was never meant to happen. This story started during the second year of college at a quiet university tucked between wide green hills and an old river that curved behind the campus like a silent guardian. The place was known for its peaceful atmosphere, tall maple trees, and red brick buildings that looked older than the town itself. For most students, it was just another college. For Evan Calloway, it became the place where love began and where everything later collapsed. Evan had always been the quiet type, not shy exactly, but careful. He carried himself with a calm confidence that came from growing up fast. His father owned a successful architectural firm in the city, which meant Evan grew up surrounded by success, expectations, and responsibility. But his childhood had never been completely peaceful. When Evan was 13, his mother passed away after a long illness. The loss changed the house forever. His father tried to fill the emptiness by focusing even harder on work, while Evan learned how to live in silence. 2 years later, his father remarried. That was when Miranda Calloway entered their lives. Miranda was elegant, intelligent, and perfectly composed. She had a reputation for being charming in public and extremely controlling behind closed doors. From the outside, she looked like the perfect wife for a wealthy businessman. But Evan always felt something else behind her smile, something calculating, something cold. Miranda also had a younger sister named Celeste Marlowe. Celeste visited their house frequently during Evan's teenage years. She was beautiful in a very polished way, always dressed perfectly, and always acting overly kind whenever Evan was around. At first, Evan assumed she was simply friendly, but over time it became clear that Celeste's attention toward him was not accidental. Miranda seemed to encourage it. Evan never responded to those hints. His focus remained on school and eventually on getting accepted into the university he wanted. The farther away he could get from the complicated atmosphere of that house, the better. College felt like freedom. For the first time in years, Evan lived somewhere that felt like his own life, and that was where he met Lena Hartley. Lena was studying environmental science and had a quiet energy that made people naturally comfortable around her. She had warm brown eyes, long dark hair usually tied loosely behind her shoulders, and a way of smiling that felt honest in a world that often felt fake. Their first meeting happened on a cool autumn afternoon in the campus library. Evan had been sitting at a table near the tall windows overlooking the river, buried in architectural design books. Lena arrived looking for a place to study and ended up sitting at the same table. The moment felt ordinary, but something about the peaceful silence between them felt natural. Over the following weeks, they started seeing each other more often around campus. Study sessions turned into walks across the university gardens. Walks turned into quiet evenings by the river. Soon, it felt like they had always known each other. For Evan, Lena brought something he had been missing for years: peace. She never cared about his family name, his father's company, or the money people often associated with him. Around Lena, Evan simply felt like a normal college student. Winter arrived slowly that year. Snow covered the campus in soft white layers, while cold winds moved through the trees. During that winter, Evan and Lena officially became a couple. Their relationship grew naturally through shared moments rather than dramatic declarations. Studying together late into the night, walking across snowy streets under glowing streetlights, sitting quietly in the campus cafe while music played softly in the background. For the first time since his mother died, Evan felt like his life was moving towards something bright. But life outside college had never truly disappeared. Miranda still watched from a distance. Whenever Evan returned home during holidays, Miranda's conversations always circled around the same subject: Celeste. Miranda constantly spoke about how wonderful Celeste was, how successful she had become in the business world, and how perfectly she would fit into the Calloway family. Evan always avoided those conversations. At first, he believed Miranda would eventually give up, but Miranda was not the kind of person who abandoned plans. She simply waited. The next summer changed everything. Evan invited Lena to visit the city for a few days before the next semester began. He wanted to show her where he grew up, the parks he used to visit as a kid, and the skyline that had inspired his passion for architecture. It felt like a simple trip, a happy one. But bringing Lena into that world also meant bringing her into Miranda's view. Miranda met Lena for the first time during a dinner at the Calloway house. The house itself stood on a hill overlooking the city, a large, modern building surrounded by glass walls and polished stone pathways. The property included a private garden, a large terrace, and a luxurious outdoor pool that overlooked the city lights. The place always felt more like a display of wealth than a home. During dinner, Miranda remained polite. Too polite. Her smile never changed, but her eyes studied Lena constantly. Celeste also attended that dinner. She behaved perfectly as well, speaking kindly and appearing supportive of Evan's relationship. But something about her gaze lingered too long whenever Evan looked away. Lena noticed the tension immediately. She was perceptive enough to feel when something was wrong, even when nobody spoke about it directly. Still, the evening ended peacefully, at least on the surface. Over the next few days, Miranda quietly began building something that nobody else could see. She invited Lena and Evan to spend one more afternoon at the house before they returned to college. She insisted it would simply be a relaxing day by the pool before the long drive back. Lena accepted politely. Evan thought nothing of it. The afternoon sun reflected across the clear blue water of the pool. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, while warm summer air filled the garden. Everything looked calm. Everything looked perfect. But behind Miranda's elegant smile, a plan had already begun moving. A plan that would destroy everything Evan cared about. And the worst part was that he wouldn't even realize it until it was far too late. The trap was already set, and the moment that would break their relationship forever was waiting beside the quiet water of that beautiful pool.
The afternoon sunlight over the Callaway estate had a strange kind of calm to it. The sky stretched wide and cloudless above the city, and the glass walls of the modern house reflected the brightness in soft, shimmering patterns across the garden. From a distance, the entire property looked peaceful. Perfectly maintained hedges lined the stone pathways, and the outdoor pool at the back of the house glowed like a sheet of clear blue glass beneath the summer sun. Beyond the garden fence, the skyline at the city stood tall and distant, almost unreal in the hazy light. For anyone visiting that afternoon, the place would have felt like the perfect setting for a quiet, relaxing day. But underneath that calm surface, something had already begun moving in careful silence. Miranda Callaway had spent years mastering the art of control. Every detail of her life was calculated, from the way she spoke in public to the way she managed relationships behind closed doors. She understood people better than they understood themselves. And when she decided to remove someone from her plans, she rarely failed. Lena Hartley had become that obstacle. Miranda never showed open hostility toward Lena. Instead, she treated her with polite curiosity, asking gentle questions about her studies and her interests during the previous dinner. To Evan, it seemed like acceptance, but Miranda's mind had already moved far ahead of that moment. She had no intention of allowing Lena to stay in Evan's life. The afternoon gathering had been her idea from the beginning, a casual invitation before Evan and Lena returned to college, something simple and friendly. At least that was how it appeared. Evan arrived at the house with Lena shortly after noon. The sun hung high above the city, filling the garden with warm light. The quiet sound of water from the pool created a peaceful background atmosphere, while a soft breeze moved through the trees around the property. Miranda greeted them at the door with her usual elegance. Her expression looked welcoming, her voice warm, her posture relaxed. Nothing about her behavior suggested anything unusual. Celeste Marlowe was already there as well. She sat near the outdoor seating area by the pool, dressed in light summer clothing, her posture graceful and composed. She looked exactly the way she always did whenever Evan was around, perfectly put together, carefully attentive, and quietly hopeful. But Evan barely noticed her presence. His attention remained on Lena. Lena spent the first hour walking through the garden with Evan, while Miranda and Celeste remained near the house. The air carried the soft scent of flowers from the landscaped pathways, and sunlight filtered gently through the tall trees around the yard. For a while, the afternoon truly did feel peaceful. Lena admired the view of the city and laughed softly when Evan told stories about growing up in the house, explaining which corners of the garden had been his favorite places as a child. For those moments, the world felt simple again. But inside the house, Miranda watched everything carefully. Every movement, every interaction, every moment Lena and Evan shared. She studied them through the wide glass windows with the quiet patience of someone who had already decided how the story would end. When the time felt right, Miranda began moving the pieces into position. She approached Evan first. Her expression remained calm as she suggested that Lena might enjoy exploring the small garden trail behind the property. The path led toward a scenic viewpoint overlooking the river valley below the hill. It sounded like a thoughtful idea. Evan encouraged Lena to take the walk while he remained behind to help Miranda with something inside the house. Lena agreed easily. The trail looked beautiful, and the quiet nature of the property made the idea appealing. She walked toward the back gate of the garden, unaware that the entire suggestion had been carefully arranged. As Lena disappeared down the trail, Miranda turned her attention fully toward Evan. She mentioned something about a package that needed to be moved near the pool area. It was a small, ordinary request that sounded completely harmless.
Evan followed her outside without hesitation. The bright afternoon sunlight reflected strongly off the water, creating shifting patterns across the surrounding stone floor. The air near the pool felt warmer than the rest of the garden, and the silence of the moment carried a strange stillness. Miranda moved closer to the edge of the water. Evan remained a few steps behind, looking slightly confused as he searched for the package she had mentioned. But the package did not exist. The moment unfolded exactly the way Miranda intended. As Evan stepped closer, Miranda suddenly moved in a way that felt completely unexpected. Her body shifted toward him quickly, her hand catching his arm as if she had slipped near the pool's edge. The movement pulled them together suddenly. Water splashed as their balance shifted, and within seconds, both of them fell partially into the pool. The cold water broke the quiet atmosphere with a sharp sound. Evan reacted instantly, reaching forward to steady Miranda as they both struggled near the edge of the pool. To anyone watching from a distance, the scene would have looked strangely intimate. Miranda leaned against him while recovering her balance. His arm remained around her instinctively as he tried to help her stand upright again. And at that exact moment, Lena returned from the garden trail. She had only walked halfway down the path before realizing she had left her phone on the outdoor table near the house. When she came back through the gate, the first thing she saw was the pool, and the figures standing together in the water. From where she stood, the scene looked completely different than the reality. The angle of the sunlight and the distance between them created a misleading picture. Miranda's body leaned closely against Evan. His arm was wrapped around her. Water glistened across their clothes while Miranda's expression appeared strangely calm. For Lena, the moment felt like the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath her feet. Shock moved through her like a cold wave. Her mind tried to process what she was seeing, but the image in front of her refused to make sense. The silence of the garden made the moment feel even heavier. Neither Evan nor Miranda noticed her standing there. From Lena's perspective, the scene looked like something deeply personal, something secretive, something that should never exist between a young man and his stepmother. The betrayal felt immediate and overwhelming. Every memory of the past year suddenly twisted into something painful. The quiet study sessions, the peaceful walks, the trust she had built with Evan, all of it seemed to collapse in that single moment beside the pool. Without thinking, Lena stepped backward slowly. Her heart pounded as confusion mixed with disbelief. She did not want to watch any longer. She did not want to stay there long enough for explanations. All she knew was that something felt terribly wrong, and in that moment, the only thing she wanted was distance. She turned away from the garden and walked quickly toward the front gate of the property. The sound of the city beyond the hill felt distant and unreal as she left the house behind. Back at the pool, Evan finally helped Miranda stand fully upright near the edge. Water dripped across the stone floor as he stepped back, still confused about what had just happened. Miranda adjusted her posture slowly. For a brief moment, her expression revealed something that Evan did not understand. A small, satisfied calm. The trap had worked exactly as planned. By the time Evan realized Lena had disappeared, it was already too late. The damage had already begun, and the lie created beside that beautiful pool was about to destroy the only relationship that had ever truly mattered to him.
The first thing Evan noticed after the strange accident by the pool was the silence. It felt heavier than it should have. The garden that had seemed warm and peaceful only minutes earlier now carried a strange emptiness. The sunlight still reflected across the water, the breeze still moved gently through the trees, and the distant city skyline remained unchanged. But something inside the atmosphere had shifted. Evan stood near the pool with damp clothes clinging to his arms, trying to process what had just happened. Miranda had already stepped away from the water and was calmly drying her hands with a towel she had taken from a nearby chair. Her composure returned almost instantly. To Evan, the moment still felt confusing. The fall into the pool had happened too quickly for him to fully understand how it started. Miranda explained it casually, through gestures and calm movements, as if it had simply been a small accident caused by slipping near the edge. Her expression remained composed and lightly amused by the awkward moment. But something about the situation felt off. Evan could not explain why. A quiet unease settled in his mind. Then another realization struck him. Lena. He had not seen her return from the garden path. At first, he assumed she might still be walking along the trail or exploring the viewpoint Miranda had mentioned earlier. The property behind the house stretched into a small wooded area that connected to the hillside, and it was easy to lose track of time there. Still, the silence bothered him. Evan stepped away from the pool and walked toward the back gate of the garden, expecting to see Lena somewhere along the path. The trail was empty. Only the soft rustling of leaves moved through the trees. He walked farther along the path, scanning the hillside and the open viewpoints overlooking the valley below. The afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the ground, and the river far below shimmered faintly between the hills. There was no sign of her. A strange feeling began growing in Evan's chest. He returned toward the house more quickly now, thinking perhaps Lena had gone inside. The outdoor seating area near the pool looked untouched except for the towel Miranda had used. The glass doors leading into the house reflected the bright garden behind him. Inside, the living room remained quiet. No movement. No sound. Evan walked through the house searching for her, checking the kitchen, the front hallway, and the terrace overlooking the city. She was nowhere. Then he noticed something small on the outdoor table near the garden chairs. Lena's phone. The sight of it sent a sharp feeling of worry through him. She would never leave without it. Evan picked it up slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. The afternoon was beginning to feel unsettling, as if something had happened while he was not paying attention. He stepped outside again and scanned the driveway. The front gate of the property stood partially open. That was when the realization finally struck him. Lena had left. The idea made no sense. Nothing had happened between them that morning. The day had started peacefully, filled with simple plans and quiet happiness before they returned to campus. There had been no argument, no tension, no reason for her to suddenly walk away. Evan tried calling her immediately. Her phone remained silent in his hand. A cold weight settled in his chest. Behind him, Miranda appeared near the doorway leading to the garden. Her expression showed mild curiosity, as if she had just noticed the situation. Evan gestured toward the empty driveway and the phone in his hand, his confusion clear even without words. Miranda looked toward the gate calmly, then back toward Evan. Her reaction seemed thoughtful, almost analytical.
She walked slowly toward the garden table, her eyes briefly scanning the surroundings. Then something subtle crossed her face, a moment of quiet understanding. But it vanished almost instantly behind her usual composed expression. Inside her mind, the plan had already succeeded. She understood exactly what Lena must have seen, the positioning by the pool.
The moment of physical closeness when Evan helped her stand, the way it would appear from a distance. Miranda had calculated those details carefully. From the right angle, the moment could easily look intimate, unacceptable, even shocking. To someone who trusted Evan deeply, that image alone would be enough to shatter everything. And Lena had arrived at exactly the right moment. Miranda knew the damage would not heal easily. Trust, once broken in such a way, rarely returned. But Evan still had no idea what had happened. The confusion in his mind continued to grow. As the afternoon moved slowly toward evening, he drove back toward the city with a heavy feeling in his chest. Lena's silence weighed on him during the entire drive. He tried calling several times using his own phone once he realized hers remained behind. Each attempt ended the same way. No answer. The peaceful trip they had planned together now felt like something completely different. By the time Evan returned to the small apartment he rented near the university, the sun had already begun setting behind the distant hills. The campus streets looked quiet as students moved between dorm buildings and cafes, unaware of the storm building inside his thoughts. Evan checked Lena's apartment building first. The hallway outside her door felt cold and silent. The door remained closed. Lights inside the apartment glowed faintly through the curtains, but there was no response when he knocked. He waited for a long time. Nothing. Eventually, he returned to his own apartment, the unease growing heavier with every passing hour. Something had clearly happened, something he could not see. The following days became even stranger. Lena stopped attending the usual places where they studied together. The library table near the tall windows remained empty. The cafe, where they often spent quiet evenings, showed no sign of her. Evan walked through campus searching for her constantly. The large maple trees lining the pathways had already begun turning orange with early autumn colors, and fallen leaves gathered across the sidewalks as the weather slowly cooled. The beauty of the season felt distant and meaningless. All Evan could think about was the unanswered question: why had Lena disappeared so suddenly? 3 days later, he finally saw her again. She was walking across the campus courtyard near the science building, surrounded by other students moving between classes. For a brief moment, relief rushed through him. He moved quickly toward her. But when Lena noticed him approaching, something changed in her expression. Her eyes filled with a cold distance he had never seen before, a quiet sadness, and something deeper, disappointment. She stopped walking. The crowded courtyard seemed to fade into the background as they stood facing each other. Evan could see the emotional weight in her face, even though she remained completely silent. The warmth that once existed between them had vanished, replaced by a quiet wall of pain. Lena's gaze carried a single message that required no words. The trust she once had in him was gone. Whatever she believed she had seen that afternoon by the pool had already rewritten every memory of their relationship. And no explanation had been given. No truth had reached her. From her perspective, the story was already complete. For Evan, the nightmare had only just begun. Because somewhere far away, inside the quiet luxury of the Calloway house overlooking the city, Miranda Calloway was watching everything unfold exactly as she had planned. The silence between Evan and Lena was not an accident. It was the final step of a carefully designed lie. And the deeper the misunderstanding grew, the harder it would become to repair the damage. The beautiful relationship that had once brought Evan peace was slowly collapsing into something painful and irreversible. All because of a single moment beside a quiet pool, and a lie that nobody had explained yet. Autumn slowly settled across the university town. The maple trees that once carried soft green leaves now burned with shades of amber, red, and gold. Wind moved gently through the campus pathways, carrying fallen leaves across sidewalks and stone courtyards where students hurried between lectures. For most people, the season felt calm and beautiful. For Evan Calloway, the world had never felt more hollow. Nearly 2 weeks had passed since the afternoon at the Calloway estate. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks of confusion, and 2 weeks of watching the only person who had ever made his life feel peaceful slowly disappear from it. Lena Hartley had not vanished completely from campus, but she had built a quiet distance that felt impossible to cross. Their schedules overlapped in places like the library and the science courtyard, but whenever Evan appeared nearby, Lena would quietly leave. Her expression remained distant, not angry, not emotional, just quietly closed off. That silence hurt far more than any argument could have. Evan spent those days replaying the memory of the pool over and over in his mind. The sudden fall, Miranda grabbing his arm, the splash of water, the strange moment when she leaned against him while he tried to steady her. At first, the scene seemed harmless, an awkward accident, but the more he thought about it, the more details began to feel wrong. Miranda had been standing perfectly stable before the fall. The poolside floor had been dry. The movement had happened too suddenly, too deliberately. A slow realization began forming in Evan's mind. Something about that moment had been staged. But the idea seemed impossible.
Why would Miranda do something like that? The answer came one quiet evening in late October. Evan had returned home for the weekend to collect some documents his father needed for a university internship program. The Calloway house looked the same as always, standing tall above the city skyline with its glass walls reflecting the fading evening light. Inside, the house felt calm, too calm. His father was away on a business trip overseas, leaving Miranda alone in the large modern home. Evan tried to avoid long conversations with her whenever possible, but that evening, something different happened. While walking through the hallway near the main study, he heard voices coming from the partially open door. Miranda was inside. She was speaking on the phone. Normally, Evan would have continued walking, but something about the tone of her voice stopped him. It carried a quiet satisfaction he had never noticed before. He remained still in the hallway, listening without meaning to. The conversation was not loud, but the silence of the house made every word easy to hear. Miranda was speaking with Celeste, and the subject of their conversation felt like a slow knife sliding into Evan's chest. Miranda spoke about the situation with calm confidence, explaining how everything had unfolded exactly the way she expected. She described the moment at the pool in careful detail, the way she had deliberately pulled Evan into the water, the exact positioning that would make it appear intimate to anyone arriving at the right moment, the certainty that Lena would misunderstand what she saw. Celeste responded with quiet excitement and approval. The two sisters spoke as if they had simply completed a clever business deal. Miranda explained that Lena's absence from Evan's life had already created permanent doubt. Trust, once broken by something so disturbing, rarely returned easily. And without Lena, Evan would eventually turn back toward the family, toward stability, toward someone more suitable, toward Celeste. The cold calculation in Miranda's voice made Evan feel physically ill. For a long moment, he stood frozen in the hallway. The entire truth now unfolded clearly in his mind.
The accident by the pool had never been an accident. It had been a performance, a trap designed to destroy the relationship he cared about most, and Lena had walked into it at exactly the wrong moment. Evan stepped away from the door quietly before Miranda could notice his presence. His mind raced with anger and disbelief as he moved through the house and out into the cold evening air. Everything suddenly made sense. Lena's silence, her distant expression, the way she had looked at him in the courtyard. From her perspective, the scene she witnessed must have felt deeply wrong, and Evan had never explained it, because he never realized she had even seen it. The truth arrived too late, but at least now he understood what had happened. The following morning, Evan returned to campus with a single purpose. He needed to tell Lena the truth, not with rushed explanations or desperate attempts to defend himself, but with clear honesty about everything he had discovered. The late autumn wind swept across the campus as he searched for her. Students gathered in groups near the library steps, their conversations drifting through the cool air. The smell of coffee from the nearby cafe mixed with the scent of fallen leaves scattered across the pathways. Evan finally spotted Lena near the quiet riverside park behind the science building. She stood alone beside the water, watching the slow current move beneath the old stone bridge that connected two sides of the campus. The peaceful setting felt painfully familiar. It was the same place where they had spent many evenings during the early days of their relationship, back when everything had felt simple. Evan approached slowly. Lena sensed his presence and turned slightly. Her expression remained guarded. The quiet sadness in her eyes had not disappeared. Evan stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them moved. The river continued moving slowly beside them. The wind rustled through the trees, and the long silence between them carried the weight of everything that had been lost. Evan knew he could not erase what Lena had seen that afternoon, but he also knew the truth deserved to be known. He explained everything, not defensively, not angrily, but honestly. The accident by the pool, the strange feeling he had afterward, and finally the conversation he had overheard between Miranda and Celeste. As the truth unfolded, Lena's expression slowly changed. Confusion replaced anger, then disbelief, then something deeper, regret. The realization that the moment she witnessed had been carefully manipulated hit her slowly. The quiet image she carried in her mind for weeks suddenly looked different when seen through the truth. Miranda had created that moment deliberately. She had positioned the scene like a photograph designed to destroy trust. Lena had never given Evan the chance to explain, but Evan had never known what needed explaining. Both of them had been trapped by the same lie. The river continued moving slowly beside them as the weight of that realization settled in. The damage could not disappear instantly. Weeks of silence had already left scars. But now, at least, the truth stood in the open air between them. And somewhere far away, Miranda Calloway had not yet realized that the story she carefully constructed was beginning to fall apart. The lie that destroyed Evan's relationship had finally been exposed, and the consequences of that deception were about to reach the people who created it. The final chapter of this story had just begun.
Late autumn turned quietly into early winter. The university campus slowly changed as colder winds replaced the gentle breezes of October. The tall maple trees that once burned with bright red leaves now stood bare, their branches stretching across gray skies like thin shadows. Students moved through campus wearing heavy coats and scarves, the small cafes near the library filled with warm lights and quiet conversations, while the smell of coffee drifted through the cold air. Life continued as it always did. But for Evan Calloway, everything still felt suspended in a strange emotional space between past and present. The afternoon beside the river when the truth finally surfaced had changed something important. For weeks, a lie had quietly poisoned the relationship between Evan and Lena Hartley. A single carefully staged moment had rewritten their memories and replaced trust with silent pain. Now the truth existed, but truth alone did not immediately repair what had been broken. Standing beside the river that day, Lena had listened as Evan revealed everything he overheard at the Calloway house. The explanation unfolded slowly, piece by piece, until the entire situation became clear. The moment by the pool, Miranda's calculated movement, Celeste's quiet approval. The realization had shaken Lena deeply. For weeks, she had carried the belief that Evan had betrayed something sacred between them. The image she saw beside the pool had felt so disturbing that her mind refused to imagine any other explanation. Now that image looked completely different. Not a betrayal, a manipulation, a trap designed with disturbing precision. Still, emotional wounds did not disappear instantly. Trust, once damaged, needed time to breathe again. The days that followed that conversation remained careful and uncertain. Evan and Lena began speaking again in small moments around campus. At first, the conversations felt cautious, almost fragile, like two people carefully testing whether a bridge between them still existed. They walked together occasionally through the quiet park paths behind the science building. They studied again at the library table near the tall windows overlooking the river. But something had undeniably changed. Not necessarily something broken, something deeper. Both of them now understood how easily outside forces could twist reality when trust was shaken. For Evan, another decision waited beyond the university. The truth about Miranda's actions had not yet reached his father, and it could not remain hidden forever. The Calloway family had always been built on a reputation of success, control, and image. His father valued stability above almost everything else. But what Miranda had done went far beyond simple manipulation. She had deliberately destroyed a relationship to push Evan towards Celeste, and she had done it without hesitation. 2 weeks after the conversation by the river, Evan returned to the Calloway house again. This time, his father was home. The winter sky above the city looked pale and distant as Evan stood outside the familiar glass walls of the modern house. From the outside, nothing about the building suggested the quiet deception that had unfolded inside it. But Evan's perspective had permanently changed. Inside the house, the air felt tense. Miranda greeted him as she always did, calm and elegant, her expression carrying the same polite composure she showed the world. But something in Evan's gaze told her immediately that the situation had shifted. His father sat in the large living room overlooking the city skyline. The evening lights of the city stretched far across the horizon, reflecting softly through the glass walls of the house. Evan explained everything. Not emotionally.
Not dramatically, just clearly. The staged accident by the pool. The conversation he overheard between Miranda and Celeste. The deliberate attempt to destroy his relationship. As the truth unfolded, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. His father listened quietly. The man who built a powerful architectural firm from nothing had always possessed sharp instincts about people, and the more details Evan revealed, the clearer the situation became. Miranda attempted to maintain her composure. At first, she dismissed the story as a misunderstanding. Then she shifted toward explanations that tried to soften the reality of her actions. But the careful balance she maintained for years had finally begun collapsing. The calm authority that once defined the house now turned against her. By the end of the evening, the silence inside the living room felt final. Miranda Calloway had lost the trust she worked so carefully to maintain. The consequences of her plan were no longer avoidable. Celeste's involvement also became clear shortly afterward. The quiet encouragement she had given Miranda during the scheme destroyed any remaining possibility that Evan would ever consider the future they had imagined. For the first time in years, the carefully controlled world of the Calloway household cracked open, and with that crack came freedom. Months passed. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. The university campus changed again as small green buds appeared on tree branches and sunlight returned to the open courtyards. For Evan and Lena, time allowed something new to grow where pain once existed. Their relationship did not simply return to what it had been before. Instead, it became stronger in a quieter, more mature way. They understood each other differently now. The experience had shown them how fragile trust could be, but also how powerful honesty was when people chose to face difficult truths instead of hiding from them. Many evenings returned to the peaceful rhythm they once shared. Walking beside the river, studying together in the library, watching the sunset colors spread across the hills surrounding the campus. The calm happiness that once defined their relationship slowly returned, but this time it carried deeper awareness. They both knew how close they had come to losing everything because of someone else's manipulation. The memory of that afternoon by the pool would never disappear completely. It remained a reminder that appearances could be dangerously misleading, a reminder that silence could destroy trust faster than lies. And most importantly, a reminder that the truth, even when it arrives late, still has the power to rebuild what deception tries to break. Years later, when Evan thought back on that chapter of his life, the moment beside the pool still stood out clearly in his memory. The sunlight reflecting on the water, the confusion of that sudden fall, the quiet misunderstanding that followed. But the memory no longer carried the same pain, because in the end, the lie that was meant to destroy his future revealed something more important instead. It showed him who truly stood beside him when the truth finally surfaced. And sometimes, that was the only thing that mattered. The beautiful pool on the hill above the city still existed. The house still overlooked the skyline, but the power of the deception created there had long since faded. What remained was something stronger. Truth, trust rebuilt, and a love that survived the lie meant to end it.